Hello and welcome everyone, Lionheart here, and today we've got a very exciting video for you guys because we are diving into Total War Empire, but this time we've gone mobile. So I'm of course joined by the fabulous team at Feral Interactive. We've got Benedict and Edwin. Some of you thinking, wait, that's a PC game, right? It's now gone mobile. So these guys have been working for a good number of years now, taking some of the classic Total War games and making them mobile. And that's not cutting stuff away that you traditionally see with mobile games, cutting half it away and just taking the name and turning it into a mobile version. These are the original games made to work on mobile. Is probably a vague way of describing what they've done here, but it's the full games with mobile controls, redesigned UI, often overhauled features as well to not only work better on mobile, but also they're pretty good at taking key features and just giving them a breath of fresh air, breathing in new life into a few of the features as well, and also just some good solid quality of life improvements. So perhaps we can just do a little kind of primer introduction on what both of you guys do at Feral, or what you've done previously, and then we'll jump on into some of the various bits and pieces that players will dive into with Total War Empire.
Okay, I guess I'll start. My name's Edwin Smith. I've worked at Feral for over 20 years now, so I've worked on every Total War game on either Mac, Linux, or mobile since the original Rome, all the way through to the DLC that's coming in a couple of weeks for Warhammer 3, and also all of the mobile ones. So the original idea of bringing Total War to mobile, I was involved from the beginning, and it was kind of a bucket list thing I always wanted to do. So it's kind of crazy to think this is the, you could argue, 5th Total War game to make it to mobile, because BI and Alexander ship separately. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing this, actually, because you get to go back and play the classics and sort of I don't know, I guess tweak little things that you always kind of wanted to do when you were a player. So it's a great opportunity. And I'll hand over to Benedict.
Benedict Parker. I was design lead on Empire and also Med 2, mobile, both. I joined, well, not 20 years ago, about the time we were at the tail end of the Romes. So I've been here for 5-6 years, something like that. Yeah, it's good fun. And I'm excited to first get the game into your hands, the general public, but secondly to discuss our changes today.
Fantastic. Yeah. So let's start with talking about some of the new changes. And there is, as we've said separately, there is a big document that I've had a chance to look through of all the sweeping changes that you guys have done for Total War Empire. And it's not just about the kind of technical challenges of taking a Total War game, making it mobile, adding in those touch controls and navigation options, but it's also you guys have taken opportunity to add in some new features. So I don't know if we could talk a little bit about what's almost exclusive to Total War Empire on mobile.
I think maybe the best ones to talk about are probably the replenishment and everything. So I mean,
I've got a little handy dandy iPad here that we're
brilliant.
At, so who's a fun faction? I like the Ottomans personally. Let's go with that.
Yeah. So yeah, so you would have noticed that sort of we did things like change the complete campaign map, campaign setup screens, and one of the things we added was oh, actually, here we go. First thing which comes in, we actually now have a dynamic help system. So when you're playing, you get information about stuff with like little mini videos of how to do the gestures and everything else. So this is less of a change to the desktop, and I think, you know, it was, nowadays people don't read help manuals, which Empire came with a 200-page PDF or something. People don't read that anymore. So now we just try to make everything dynamic, so you get little help bars, shortcuts, things like that. I think
also, well, yeah, you get dynamic, but also if you want to like request or look up information, we've got a whole advisor menu, ooh-la-di-da, where you can see the first time helps again, but also just any old topic on, you know, how to play the game.
So if you select one,
with trade.
Yeah, so you have trade, and it'll even have shortcuts to take you to the right areas of the game and everything.
What's the trade theatre?
Yeah.
Da, 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 da.
So I think the big thing for this, which I think hopefully users will quite like, is when we were working on this, we had a lot of questions of how exactly does trade really work? Like what makes things move up and down actually? Where are the influences of stuff? Talking of trade, and we were trying to work out like how does it actually work so we can explain it to players on mobile. And by doing that, we went and decided to go and change some of how the UI explains things. So I think sort of, for example, if we open up the trade area, you've got an expanding area where you can have a look at what's the most popular different types of trade, what the demand is, and also what the top exporter is of that type of trade. So for example, I can go, oh, look, the United Provinces are, in this example, they are exporting 105 pounds out of the total world supply of 160 pounds of spices or something like that.
Yeah.
So then you can actually think, okay, if I want to go and attack the United Provinces, if I go and put a few ships on their trade routes, I'm going to completely decimate part of their economy because you know what's going on. And then that allows you to do the tactical thing. So I think a lot of what we tried to do on improving the game is allow the player to spend more time having like what I call the fun and less time having to dig around in screens to do the micro.
Yeah.
So that's a really kind of good example of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to it's not making it easier. It's just making the information come to the fore so that you can spend your time doing fun stuff.
Well, that's the thing, because it's a strategy game, and the essence of a strategy game is you make decisions based on appropriate levels of information. So, the essence of it is giving the player the amount of information that allows them to make interesting, fun decisions. So sometimes that's holding things back, but in this case, it's just giving them that little bit of extra insight.
Yeah, I mean, that's already kind of given me a totally different way of thinking about which enemies I want to attack, because in the original game, I didn't get that information about who's got the top exporting of various bits. Obviously, you'd look around the map and be like, okay, we can see they've got lots of the sugar plantations in the Caribbean and things like that. So probably a safe bet that if you take those, you're going to do some economic damage to them. But it's nice being able to see that readout very clearly of who's doing what. But also, I guess as a snapshot, it kind of lets you know what the AI is doing to a degree economically. And I just feel that brings that layer, because this is a very broad period of not just war, but also kind of political, industrial, agricultural, economic, build up. This is our period of real solid imperial empire building within kind of more recent history. Otherwise you're going back to medieval empires or Roman empires even further back. So it's great that kind of extracts that and brings that to the forefront, because to me that brings out a level of depth that I hadn't previously kind of thought about or really encountered too much. I just go, oh yeah, they've got trade. Yeah.
But yeah, for instance, in the last campaign I had, I looked at this and because I was playing as Ottomans, one of my favorite factions, and I thought, oh, hang on, why are the Marathas shifting like 500 tons of ivory every turn?
Yeah.
Oh, that means they must be trading from those trade things. I was at war with them, so I just sent in a load of fleets, knocked out like a good chunk of their income, and dominated that trade. I only knew that because of this information.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So I mean, I think another one which people will probably ask about is how the different regions work. So I actually was watching one of your streams the other day, and you were playing one of the Empire mods, and one of the things you were doing is you go into a region, you click around on all of the different little towns and ports, checking what you can upgrade. What we did for the mobile version is along the bottom, when you select the region capital, you get all the buildings for the region capital. You then get a breaking bar, and then we list every single other sub-town upgrade slot there as well. So no more clicking about trying to work out what's available where. You can just instantly see. And on top of that, we've put little color-coded dots so you can see what level of upgrade it is and whether or not an upgrade is currently available. So green means you've upgraded. A little blue dot means that there is an upgrade available. So you don't also even need to do that click of like, can I upgrade this building yet? Can I upgrade this building yet? You can instantly see. So it just makes going around the world so much quicker, because between that and the next major settlement left-right buttons that you have on You can just go through all of your regions, clicking through and just instantly going, "Oh, that one can be upgraded. That one can be upgraded." And again, it saves time on mobile, because mobile you don't have as much space, but also it just I personally, one of the things I really think about is not so much your experience on turn 1, but the experience on like turn 60. You're really deep into a campaign, and you've got all of this micro. And what we try and do is make it so that the micro, you're doing the important stuff that you care about, and you don't feel like you're just having to repeatedly go in and out of menus checking things.
No,
all the information again, surface it quickly. Another little thing that we did with that was, if you notice certain like farms might have be more productive than others, we surface that information as well, so you can actually see this is like a sort of, you know, a level 1, level 2, level 5. And again, it just makes it a little bit easier when you're scrolling through everything to be like, I should probably upgrade the level 5 fertility area because it's going to be more money. And again, you could kind of work this stuff out by looking at how much money's coming in.
Yeah.
But it just takes ages. And it's like, well, if we can expose that, then it allows you to make the same tactical decision, but you can make that decision in, you know, 10 seconds instead of 5 minutes.
Just to add a couple of extra things to that. So on those pits, in addition to showing current level and available upgrades, we can also show maximum levels and upgrades in progress and damaged buildings. Also, those little icons for showing like prosperity rating, you know, it's a very fertile farm or, you know, a meager one. They're also they also show a type. So we've got a farm type, a port type, industry town type, and a like other resource like mine type. So you have that extra element of sorting an organization. And if you want a really like quick high level overview of your entire empire, in the lists section, we've also added some information for each region about, you know, what of each of those 4 types it has and how many in total upgrades are available in that area, as well as when the next town is going to emerge, or, you know, if all of them have emerged.
With all they're established, yeah.
Again, just providing that high level overview that maybe isn't, you know, super useful turn 1 or 2 when you're playing as Prussians and you start with 2 regions, but once you've got a like 40 region empire with developments happening all the time, it just makes those last turns a bit smoother.
Definitely. I mean, I think something you said there earlier about kind of watching my streams and kind of how I play it, it's something sometimes my viewers pick up on. It's like they say, why don't you use the little buttons either side of the settlements to jump around? And I say, typically I prefer not to do that, and that's across all Total War games up to Warhammer 3. I don't like doing that because I don't then look at the wider map. So that's why I end up going around each individual, you know, especially when you've got games like Empire, where everything it's not all centralized, it's decentralized out, where you've got your unique resources and things like that. So that's even as I said, up to Warhammer 3, I still go around the map and check everything individually, because there isn't a nice unified bit of UI, unlike what you guys have done with Total War Empire for mobile, because you've got everything all in one. So then I won't have to go around the map looking for stuff, because I can see it all there, readily accessible. And as you said, like, I think a lot of what you guys do so well with these titles is so bringing obviously you're adding new bits in when you can, but it's also just about bringing out some of that stuff that was kind of almost just hidden, not necessarily intentionally, but has fallen away from the surface, and just bring that. Like, you're talking about fertility. I didn't even realize there was a way to check fertility in Empire. I assume probably hovering the mouse over a region maybe gave a tooltip, but you don't typically think to kind of check for that. Whereas now I can go, oh yeah, I've got level 5 on these farms, so I've got high fertility there. That's a good region, so I definitely want to focus economically in getting my farms up there, because they're going to produce more than than a region with 2 fertility or something like that. So it just helps you structure your economic play. And I think that's already is quite a big theme on lots of like subtle tweaks to the economic play in Total War Empire, which is obviously a big part of the period and generally with empire building. And I think that probably brings us on potentially to town wealth and town prosperity, because I know that's kind of
you're ready for a lecture.
Yeah, well, I was looking at that and reading through it, and I was like, I know it's good when it's the only bit I'll mention. It says to avoid confusion is the starting line on it. So I was like, you know what, I'm definitely gonna get these guys to be an explainer on this, because I think a lot of people will go, okay, there's a bit more depth here than we weren't previously aware of. town wealth and town prosperity. What is it? Why should I care about it? And how does it work in Total War Empire? Let the lecture begin.
It's a bit of a special case with regard to this. I think it's the only game that does the economics quite this way.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a bit later about stuff like replenishment, where it'll be broadly familiar to your audience who, probably play Warhammer and Rome 2 and all that kind of thing. But Empire's economics are, fairly distinct, even from like Napoleon and Shogun 2, which has similarities with. And that whole to avoid confusion thing is because there are two terms that were kind of used originally, which were basically the same: town wealth in one sense and town wealth in another sense. For the document I sent to you, I was referring in terms of like town wealth, the numerical value tracked centrally within a region, and town prosperity, which were like those ratings we mentioned previously, these multipliers to the performance of economic buildings.
Yep.
So there were the prosperity ratings for resource sites and prosperity ratings for towns and ports. The former are kind of static and fixed. The latter were dynamic in character. They could change. A town or port could become more prosperous during play as things went along. And the influencing factor on that was town wealth in the first sense, that numerical value, that buff. I'm just going to, the iPad, pull up a little town. The kind of advanced economic buildings that you had, like factories and whatnot, the thing that they produced. And as that town wealth value from the settlements went up at certain thresholds, in the original logic, the towns in the region were supposed to increase in prosperity. So the game would basically check all the ones in the region, it would pick the one with the lowest prosperity value and upgrade it by 1 point, and then reset the threshold at which the upgrade would happen. Or rather, it was kind of meant to do that, but we dug into things, found a few small issues with it that kind of threw off the way I think the economy was supposed to progress.
Yeah.
The first of which being that there was a bug to do with ports, where the step of upgrading never quite fired properly for them, which meant that a region with a port could never really progress fully to its maximum prosperity value, because the logic would, you get to the appropriate amount of town wealth, the logic would go, oh, I need to upgrade something. You pick the port, the function to upgrade the port to the next tier would fail, and then the system would just try again next turn on the same port.
Right.
They would just do that over and over again and kind of bung up the region.
Constantly firing, saying, hey, I've reached this threshold, and the game's coming back going, no, we don't see that you've got like a +1 modifier to take you up to that. So it's okay, I'll try again next turn. They're just the same thing.
Yeah, because actually there was another issue with the town prosperity thing, just on that function. So firstly, you had the problem that it skewed the balance of coastal regions versus landlocked regions, which we've now, let's say, addressed, so they all progress uniformly. But also that function that was meant to upgrade the prosperity and then set the threshold to a new higher threshold, that also had an issue with it, where the new higher threshold wasn't being set properly. So for those regions that were hitting that prosperity upgrade, they were hitting it every single turn. And as a result, once you kind of hit this wall of you're over that threshold, your region would suddenly kind of explode in value. Again, it's one of the things that probably like a few users on a forum noticed, and that's it. But it slightly skewed the game experience, I think, for most people, of giving you a little bit too much money in the late game.
Yeah.
So between that and a couple of other changes, our overall shift with the economy is a bit more money, or like being able to afford a bit more unit content in the early game. And in the late game, you don't get quite as much of an extreme and substantial treasury growth every turn. And for changes like this, we need to make sure we got them in fairly early in the project, so we had a lot of time to play test them and iterate and tune as needed, because when you make a fairly large economic change, it can have fairly large
ramifications across everything.
Yeah, I think it's basically smoothing out the curve, because I think it was kind of very, very slow, and then it would like snowball with Empire. So you'd be going quite slowly, and then once you hit a thing, you'd be like drowning in money, and you could spend lots of money. Whereas you're trying to make it more of an even, smooth curve throughout the game. So early on, you have a bit more time, a bit more ability to recruit troops and stuff, and you're not in that kind of it speeds up the early game a little bit, and then it slows down the end game to kind of stop you being able to steamroller across entire continents
Definitely.
quite as easily. You still can if you're good,
Yeah.
but it's a little bit more. And if you want, you can cheat, which is another thing that we've added.
Yeah.
Empire removed the cheat console from Med 2, and Rome had it. So we've sort of added a simpler version of it. So if you put your fingers in the corner, which is the standard Total War Mobile cheat mode, we just added buttons instead. So you can add goals, toggle the fog of war, and complete your construction and complete your recruitment queues. So those are the top 4 cheats that, if you're just wanting to do what I call sort of like tell me a story mode, basically you just want to take everything over, and or you make a mistake and you're like, I don't want to have to go back 20 turns because I overextended myself. I just want to quickly fix it. It's there, the only person you're cheating, I think, with cheats is you. So if you're happy to use them, like, go for it. I unashamedly have played a bunch of campaigns where like I just give myself a bunch of money because I'm kind of like wanting to pick a really hard, weird faction in the middle of nowhere, play as them, and just have fun slowly going across. I'm like, if I give myself a bit of money at the beginning, I've got a fighting chance. I don't need to worry about other bits. Especially if I'm kind of sat on the sofa and a bit tired and I just want to kind of have a more casual gameplay session.
Definitely.
So yeah, we kind of added that one in.
I do not associate with this cheating man.
Yeah.
Play all of my campaigns 100% legitimate.
Yeah.
I think the one
I mean, I think it's a fair option, and it's if you're playing campaign single player.
Well, I think of those, the one that's quite nice as well, at least from like a kind of creator's perspective as well, is having the ability to toggle fog of war, because that's always good to have like a snapshot of, I don't know, every so often, every like 15, 20 turns go, oh, well, let's just see what's happening across the rest of the map. And I love the story that you get to tell there, and kind of the surprise of, oh, look, what are the Ottomans doing over there? Or why are the Dutch over there? Or, what's happening with France? They're just down to Portugal or something like that. That's always good fun to kind of, when you don't get an opportunity to kind of keep track of everything because you're busy managing your empire. It's nice to kind of take that pause and, be able to go, okay, let's take off the fog of war and just have a little scroll around and just see what's going on within the rest of the world, the campaign map. I
mean, you did just mention the campaign map, and one thing which we added, which I wanted to add for ages in our games, and with Empire, we massively refactored how we do UI to make it allow us to do more like nice modern animations, is the mini map in the corner has a little drag bar. So if you drag it, you can make it bigger or smaller to the exact size you want. So it's no longer that kind of like, this is the size you've got, maybe big mode and small mode. You can stretch. So that is, I find super useful, especially with different size phones or different size tablets. If you're playing on an iPad mini, you might want to make it a little bit bigger. So when I'm playing on my like iPhone, I actually make it a fair bit bigger so I can actually see the detail of what's going on, because sometimes the mini map is almost more important than the little bits I'm looking at, but then you can shrink it back down again. And it feels like a small thing, but when you're like in turn 70 and you've been playing a lot and you're wanting to quickly see what's going on, being able to set it to what exactly fixes is kind of useful. And it's those little things, I think, sort of.
I mean, it works in battles too as well. I use it sometimes when I've won the battle and I want to just do the bit where you chase down all the routers and just have the map a bit bigger so I can make sure I've got someone going to all of them and haven't missed any.
Fantastic.
Have to flee my mighty hordes.
Trying to think what other bits. Oh, research is probably the other really big one that we've done as well. So research. So I'll start and let Benedict jump in. But basically, this was something that I think the research tree in Empire it was the beginning of the new way of doing things. And I think it was a really well laid out, quite detailed research tree. But I think one of the things that sort of I noticed by looking at forum posts and people playing is research wasn't used, I think, quite as much as it could be by players, or maybe wasn't being used as efficiently, because it was kind of like, it was very easy to forget, what university is doing the research? And you could forget for 2 or 3 turns, have I, double checked and going in. So we had a look at like later games and better ways of, more efficient ways that newer games have been doing these kind of things. And what we decided to do was, instead of having all the different universities and schools individually do research, all of your universities and schools now have points, and they all get put together, and you now have a research area where you can assign research to different things, and you can decide how many points you want to assign to them. So one of the advantages of this is, early on in the original game, if you had one university or two, you'd have to very narrowly focus what you were doing. Whereas with points, it allows you to more slowly research multiple things at once.
Yep.
And equally, nearer the end of the game, when you have loads and loads of schools and you're wanting to try and quickly get to something, you can assign, more points to trying to finish stuff off. We've obviously put caps, so you can't pour everything in and finish things which were supposed to be done in one turn, in one turn instead of 20. But I think that just makes it a lot easier to be able to just go into your research, and it's on the main screen. On the left-hand side, you have a little research with a number, and if that number is anything above 0, it means you have unspent points. So it's very easy to always be using your research and thinking about what your research is doing.
It also makes it, because we're doing these points assignments, it's quite easy to time certain things, because there are certain technologies in the game that give you a benefit, but they also maybe make your troops more expensive. So you can perhaps dip into square formation, just have that pootling along while you have a few economic things that you're rushing a bit faster, and then make it so they both line up about the same time, and they both research, and your economy stays about the same, but your troops are now stronger.
Especially when that loops into you probably wanting to try and manage technologies that you need to upgrade certain buildings or unlock certain buildings. Like, you want those started nice and early, so you can kind of plan out your military reforms or whatever you're doing there, but you also don't want to do that at the expense of not having any economic stuff. So you can have that, as you say, set a few points into the long-term upgrade for your artillery schools or what have you, while focusing the rest of your points into your agriculture or early industry stuff.
And you can shift priorities mid task. So you can pull points out of a task and put them somewhere else as they're going along. So for instance, when it comes to the building ones, I find that sometimes I go, oh, I really love to build loads and loads of this building. And then as I get close to that one completing, I realize, actually, I don't have anywhere near the money needed to do that. My priorities are elsewhere, so I can then pull points back from that and put them.
You're not locked in. You don't if you commit 10 points when you first choose the technology, a few turns later you're like, oh, I need to adjust those. You can scale the points back or forward if you've got the capacity. Just makes it really dynamic, I think. As a system. And so the problem I have with some of the stuff that you guys do is that I then want this in the PC version as well, because I'm like, that's just such a, as I said, like I love that it's not just let's put mobile controls on this, change the UI. It's also, you guys spend a lot of time thinking, where are the elements where we can actually improve the core gameplay or even kind of niche aspects of the gameplay. And it's not just about improving them for the mobile experience, it's just about the overall game experience, making it just even work better in some regards. And technology, again, because I'm currently playing an Empire Total War campaign at the moment, I'm really actively having to constantly think about going, right, which one of my universities or colleges or whatever is researching which. Oh, I've forgotten that. Oh, I've lost a whole turn of research that I could have. But this, you can set it, you can leave it, but you also have that very clear indicator of, hey, you've got some points, probably should use them. Just such a much more better system. I really, really like that improvement technology.
Also, on the point of your universities, I'm assuming that you're possibly doing the thing which the game encourages you to do, of having, okay, this university is my military one, this one is my agriculture one, because of the traits gens. We've kind of simplified, or I don't know what the right word for it is, but we've made it a little more user-friendly, because now those gen buffs are, like the effects of themselves, decentralized. So you have their bonuses to specific trees will be applied just whenever you're researching a technology from that tree. So you no longer need to think of, I have to research my agricultural technologies in my university in Persia, and I have to research my naval ones in my university in Anatolia, so I have to kind of keep pushing up those trees. with these places. Now it's just whenever you want to have a, agricultural technology going, your bonus points to agriculture will apply. More specifically, it'll be divided evenly between all of your agriculture.
And this has also changed gentlemen a little bit now. They don't have to just sit in university all their lives to kind of get the maximum benefit. Because I feel like in the original game, you're always torn because you had the option to go and steal technology, which is quite a risky thing for gentlemen, because if they failed, there's a chance they could get killed or wounded for a few turns, and then you lose all the benefit of that agent. Whereas if you keep them safe at university for all their lives and throw away the key, at least they're giving you that passive bonus to research.
Yeah, so now they apply that passive bonus, not just if they're in a university, but if they're anywhere in one of your regions. So the other thing that gents are kind of useful to do is you beat up other people's gents or rakes if they come near you. So now you can take a gent out of wherever you parked them in a region, beat up that thing, that object that's come to threaten you, and then if you forget next turn to put them back into a town, it doesn't matter because they're still providing.
Yeah.
But on the point of gent stealing, we have made a few tweaks with that. So, the thing about that formula for the gent stealing effect is the bigger the technology in terms of its cost, so the later it was, the lower those chances of success became. And it was a simple binary, you either succeed or you fail. So kind of by the mid-late game, when you're researching mid-late technologies, the chances of stealing were incredibly low. And as a result, it tended to be a mechanic that dropped away in usefulness outside of the early game. The way we've tweaked the formula is now when gents try and steal a tech, even if they fail, they still steal a few points in that tech.
Right, yeah.
Now, I think the more recent games, their agents have the idea of like a partial success and a greater success. We were kind of inspired by that.
It's
so
like
now
you've got a standard success and a critical success chance. Of the critical success is you get the whole tech, but the general success is you get some points at least towards whatever technologies you want to spend.
Indeed. And the way we've done those formulas, when you're stealing points, you get an amount that's based on the gentleman's skill and based on the cost. So you get a few more points of progress by stealing versus parking a dude in your region, particularly when you get a big technology with a big cost. So we just try and make that stealing mechanic, which was already there, just a little bit more useful without going overboard.
Yeah. And I think the other one was when you can have gentlemen learn skills, which then give you extra points. So instead of having that a little bit more randomized in the original game, we thought to make it so the player feels that they can steer the gentleman towards potentially getting those traits, a bit like in Rome, which I've spent a good 10,000 hours in at this point. If you put one of your generals inside a settlement, you had more chance of triggering certain types of traits. If they were in one which had an educational building, you might get some those kind of traits. What we did was, if you go and put a gentleman inside a port, they're more likely to gain naval traits because they're spending a lot of time in there. Equally, like when you're stealing tech, if you go to the enemy's ports and things, it will go and look at targeting those. So it's more making it so it kind of makes sense, because when we were doing it, we were like, well, if I'm a player and I'm wanting to try and enhance my naval tree, I want all my gentlemen to have a chance of getting naval traits, because that's going to speed stuff up. And it's like, how would you make that really easy to, obvious to a player? So we were like, well, actually, we have ports, we have farms, we have all of these things. So if you go to farms, they're more likely to learn about farming. So it kind of makes sense of like putting them in those locations. So again, all of that, the functionality behind it existed. What we're trying to do is, they spent years and years making Empire, and that was, well over a decade ago. So we've got the ability to look at it with kind of fresh eyes and look at the 10 years or so of newer games and go, well, we can add these little bits on top just to add a bit of polish that, they've, as you were mentioning with like, Warhammer 3, they now have these success things and the dice rolls and everything. So can we go and be inspired by that and add a little bit back in to sort of make the game? I think our aim is to like make Empire play like how you kind of remembered it when you first played it. So I remember when Empire first came out, and I was kind of like, wow, there's so many things here. There's like, it had a huge scope, and sort of you kind of forget of the things of like, oh, sure, you could do that. And, oh no, actually you couldn't. You could only do like a bit of it because kind of your memory of Empire has been smushed into every other Total War you played since. So I think it's a bit of us trying to make it so when you grab the iPad and you're kind of coming back to the game, it's like, oh, you know, and then you're like, oh yeah, that didn't actually exist, but it should actually almost feel like it was there all along. I think is what we're trying to do. Is like when you play it, it shouldn't feel like we've changed the game. It should just feel like natural, as if this
it feels like a lot of very, so as I say, it's just kind of like connecting those final points that weren't quite made with the original, or just very natural evolutions of kind of what was started and either didn't get a chance to be quite fully implemented or fully finalized.
Replenishment, as you know, pretty much every game from Napoleon onwards had the modern automatic replenishment system. And every game prior, so like Med 2 and Rome to Empire, had the kind of manual system of you retrain units in settlements. It costs you money, and then they get retrained back up to full strength. Empire's system, as you know from playing your campaign, is sort of halfway between the two. It's kind of like a manual paying money process, but you can sort of do it anywhere, and it takes always exactly 2 turns for every unit. And we decided to basically adopt a more modern Napoleon-style system. So those percentages, the passive free rates of replenishment, those are now in. You can use the old system if you want. There's an option for that, some of our religion changes, and a change we made to forcing campaign setup if you want to turn off those changes and just use the gameplay as it was. But the new default is the modern system. So when you fight a battle, you hopefully win. Your troops take some damage, and then as long as you're in a region you control, or a region that's controlled by an ally, your units will replenish a certain number of men per turn. And the UI we went for with that will be quite familiar to people who've played, particularly Napoleon or any of the new games, like a little bar showing damage and mount filled in per turn. The thing that we tuned a bit was the kind of the rates of how this work, to try and make it fit 1700s warfare, like the transition to very modernized Napoleonic style warfare. So if you played Napoleon, where a unit can be recruited matters a little bit more in Empire in terms of the percentages. So if you're in a settlement that can recruit a unit versus can't, it's like a 15% difference in the total rate, something like that. It's been a while since I looked at my numbers.
So you still kind of have that element of the older games in a little, because I know some people quite liked, not necessarily accuracy, but the process of you would pack up all of your wounded troops and send them back to Rome or something like that to then retrain them. So I guess if you've got unique, say, Coldstream Guards from Britain, you're probably better to send them, well, if you need them quickly. If they're not too far away, it's not going to take too long to sail them back. If they're just over, in France, pop them back on the ship, back to London. They'll replenish a bit faster there, because that's where you can actually recruit them from versus
it's kind of like
somewhere else.
It'll feel somewhat familiar to people who've played Med 2, but it also feels somewhat familiar to people who've played.
Gives you that flexibility that you can still replenish them in the field if you need to keep on pushing, but also if you need them back up to full strength and you want to be a bit more careful with them, send them back to where you can recruit them from. It
also means when you're if you choose to fight the battle manually, you can then prioritize certain units for the thick of the fighting a bit more if you know that they're going to finish faster in the region that you're about to take, that kind of thing. And related to that, we added in a new system, our kind of auxiliary system, which sort of related to the making interesting battlefield decisions, and it also went to a campaign thing that we wanted to tweak. So as I said previously, one of the things that we did with our economy is give you a bit less money in the late game, but a bit more kind of purchasing power in the early game. And this auxiliary system is kind of part of that, because a lot of factions in this game, they start with a bit of a colonial empire that's a bit overstretched, and they have a bunch of regions that they need to defend at a very low level. So for instance, like Spain, for instance, it starts with a bunch of little Caribbean islands, and basically no units on any of those islands, or really cheap basic ones. And we wanted to make sure that the player could afford to defend peripheral colonial regions at a low level. They wouldn't have to leave them completely undefended, in order to kind of balance their early game economy. And this auxiliary system is our approach to that. So the way it works is certain like cheap, almost like militia-like, if you played Med 2, units, including actually the militia unit in Empire, have this auxiliary attribute. And if they're in a region where they can be recruited, they get a discount to their upkeep cost and a bonus to their replenishment. But this kind of benefit, it scales negatively with the number of auxiliary units in that region that you control getting the bonus. So it starts at like 50%, so 50% discount to upkeep, and an extra plus 50% to their, 1.5 times multiplier to their replenishment. But every auxiliary unit you add then goes down by 10%.
Yeah, so you can't just spam out a huge stack of cheap auxiliary. It'll be more that you'll lose the benefit of them being cheap and cheerful, and they'll suddenly start costing.
I'm going to make a reference and make me sound cool. It's not like goblins in Warhammer. But yeah, so it lets you have a few cheap things to hold the region, give you a bit of public order, basic opposition to anyone coming to get you, or you can then integrate these auxiliaries maybe into an army that you're using more aggressively and use them perhaps as cheap units to garrison a building or cannon fodder. Something that where they can supplement a main force. Because the game simulates lovely blocks of line infantry and professional cavalry and whatnot very well, but there were a few kind of peripheral units we thought we could give a little bit of love to, make them a bit more useful, like militias or pikemen or like Spanish guerrillas, all units that now have this auxiliary attribute. So you can have a few of them doing bits and bobs for your army that maybe you weren't doing before, on desktop. That system, I've been talking in terms of land units, but it also applies to ships. So brigs, sloops, and shipwrecks are also now auxiliary ships. So they get a bit of a faster bit of replenishment, and they're a bit cheaper when you have them in a sea, because the map's divided up into individual seas. Which brings me on to the fact that this automatic replenishment system is now also available for naval conduct. So it's not just land only, as it was in Napoleon and I think Shogun 2. Don't quote me on that one. Again, you can choose to disable these things in campaign setup if you want, but they're the default. With the ships, the rates are set up such that if your fleet is in a port, it replenishes much faster, and then if it's out and about at sea, it's just a little slow rate of replenishment, which we found was useful because if you put ships on a trade node and then you maybe have a little short skirmish with something nearby, it's a bit of a pain to get those back to your ports, repair them manually and get them back to your trade nodes. So it was just having a little bit of background passive replenishment we found made those trade nodes, made that colonial aspect a bit more accessible, user-friendly, and a bit more fun.
Any kind of final points you guys want to bring up, or is there a particular system or feature or just small tweak that you're really proud of that you've kind of brought into Total War Empire? I know we haven't talked about the touchscreen controls, but I'm leaving that one for now, because I think it's something that as I go into the gameplay, and as we've probably shown by having the iPad overlay, people can kind of see how that works. And also if people hopefully are starting to get a little bit familiar with what you guys do in terms of the controls and things like that, and you've had a fair few games now to kind of work on that system, and to kind of refine those touch controls and just what works within Total War and battle management.
I think that there's only really two things to touch on. I think one was, and we gave you the extensive list, but 3D battles. We did spend a bit of time just going through and trying to. You can't, the AI in the game is fundamentally Empire still, but there were a few edge case issues that allowed people to either sort of use cheesing tactics, as I'd call it, that the AI is going to act in a certain way. So there were a few things we did with artillery on top of forts. There was a window because of how wide a cannon can fire, that you could kind of attack a fort from a 45-degree angle, and the artillery on the top couldn't hit you because of the width of the window. So we opened that up a bit more. So now you don't have this like section where you're free of fire. They will actually aim on the corners. We did a few things like try to make when the units come out, they're a lot more decisive. So one of the things which the AI used to sometimes do is kind of get stuck between should I attack or should I not? And they got closer. They started heading out to attack, gave up and headed back, and the AI thought it was being smart, but what actually it was doing was basically getting shot at without being able to shoot back. So we now made it so that AI is a little bit more positive of if it's going to go, it's going to go. And if it decides to pull back, they pull back out of your range. They don't they shouldn't get caught quite as much in crossfire. And a few other things where they're making decisions on sort of cavalry charges, or if the artillery is firing on a wall, they'll actually finish the job and then try and punch through, as opposed to trying to punch through while there's still artillery firing down. The doors of forts were sometimes opening randomly, and that turned out to be that just the gap of how close a friendly unit could be to a door was a bit too far. So if a friendly unit walked past on the AI path 400 meters away from the door, it would like, oh, I should start opening it so they can come in. And that was too early, and then you could sneak in. So, tidied those things up. So there are a few little small bits here and there to do with all of the AI.
And for instance, if you gave me another hour, I could tell you a bit more about some of our economic tweaks.
Yeah.
There's a whole system of town wealth saturation mitigation, which again was another thing about late game money not going out of control. But yeah, generally speaking, I think we've probably covered the main things that your average user is going to notice, in their first play session or two, and will hopefully enjoy. And just one more thing, just to annoy the social media chap who wouldn't let us do a post about it. We've improved carronade frigates. They now have slightly better stats.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And one thing which you will hopefully notice if you do a streaming campaign, is the save game system now inherits the save game system we put into Med 2 and some of our other mobile games, where it groups your save games by campaign.
Brilliant.
So, by faction, then by campaign. So if you go into your load menu, you select what faction you were playing as, then it lists all of your campaigns, and then inside the campaign, it has all of your save games for that campaign, which means it's really easy to find what you were doing. So it's like, oh, my French campaign. Click on the French campaign. There are 3. It was the 3rd one. You click on it, scroll down. So it's no longer like that 400 save list.
Yeah, trying to find out which one you were. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And the save games are smaller now, which is a small point, but if you're on mobile, it makes a big difference.
Definitely, yeah.
They're no longer like 100 meg in size. They're about 10 meg.
Yeah.
So that, again, small difference, but seems that we have save game syncing up to iCloud or Google Drive. Making them that much smaller means you can get 10 times as many save games up there.
And you must.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I think that was it. I just figured I'd slide that one in because it's not a gameplay thing, but it's something that I find makes a big difference.
Just,
I have loads of campaigns on the go at once.
Yeah, trying to keep track of them all. And
keep track of them, and it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, definitely. Fantastic.
Right, I think that's it. Really?
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. That was really, really insightful to kind of get that. Just I think a lot of it's just to get about pulling a lot of what I was hidden or didn't even realize was in the game just to the forefront, and obviously doing that for practicality reasons, so that for mobile players they can actually see all the information nice and clearly and have access to it, but also just to improve the kind of standard gameplay loop there, that you're fully aware of all these features that you may not have been aware that we're either not quite working in the background or were working in the background, but you're just not aware of it because there wasn't kind of connecting UI, or just it wasn't that obvious or clear of how to access that. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great.